Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Must be warming up there with you guys now because we're getting a little bit chilly. I think you guys are snacking our sun again. But I'm okay because I know you've had a particularly harsh winter. So it's okay. You can take our summer for a few months. It's okay. So I hope everybody is wonderful and well. And thank you so much for the good wishes for my mom. She's doing great. So thank you for that. Welcome to everybody in the chat room. Dragonfly, Charmaine, Carrie, Jessica. Yeah, all the regulars are here. So great to see you guys. And hello, beautiful Bryce. How are you on a marvelous, magical, mythical, murderous Monday?
This is one of my favorite times of the week because I feel like we get, for us in the morning over in the East Coast or in the United States, get your coffee for our little gossip sesh. For those over in Europe and Africa, get your little drink for a little gossip.
We got the tea going. We got the tea.
We play drinking games with Rasputin. We're going to interview along those lines today. We have Caleb in the chat. Unfortunately, we're going to talk about some wieners today. So we're going to have fun, you guys.
Okay, we'll try and behave ourselves. We will try and behave ourselves.
It's okay to gossip about dead people, right? Like it's not a crime to gossip about dead people. But you know, this is what I was thinking as I researched, because you guys, you know, I love history so much. Yeah, so maybe we'll do the eggplant. At the end of this episode, you guys, we're gonna talk about some pretty interesting furniture. And I think one of the pictures I sent you, Chantelle, even labeled BJ chair because of the eggplant.
Am I allowed to show it yet? Not yet.
Because it's kind of teasing towards we get to the end where we talk about these.
No way! Look at that! Oh my God!
This is why history is the most underrated subject you will ever study. Math, schmath, English, English.
Okay, there we go.
History is the most fascinating subject because it is literally better than any reality TV show you'll ever watch, guys. And we have the photographic evidence to show like how freaking. I mean, if you had been shown that picture of that chair in your history class in school, you probably would remember everything you need to know about Catherine the Great because
I think the teachers would never have shown us.
Sensation sells, you guys. I am telling you, I swear to God, like history is nothing but gossip. That's all it is nothing but gossip. Because you think your life is scandalous, at least you're not marrying your second cousin and then dying. You know, Catherine's collection of erotic furniture was so scandalous, even the Nazis, when they confiscated it, was like, what's this? What's this? Even the Nazis were like, what's this?
Yeah, Jessica, penises were art. Well, apparently there was a great love for wieners because they had them in pickle jars and now they're on furniture. They probably have like a aubergine shaped couch.
I mean, this predates Rasputin by a couple hundred years. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Obviously, the Russians were real bored and real cold. Because the stuff they got into, it must have been like real cold. Then the amount of vodka they drank, the amount of babies they were having.
I was going to say it must have something to do with the vodka that they were making. Maybe those potatoes were a little bit like way too fermented or something because it gave them like all sorts of illusions and things of what to do and how to do it, how just to be scandalous.
I'm just like, you know, when you make the Nazis blush, you know, there's something up. Like, and I'm not trying to like slut shame Catherine because literally the amount of partners that she had probably is no different from us in modern times. And
exactly.
Did she invest in this furniture just to kind of give in to the rumors to make her life a little bit? Maybe she bought this furniture because she had a premonition that like 200 years from now we'd be talking about her on this.
Well, like 2,000 years from now. Okay, is it 200 years?
200 years. About 200 years. like a little over 200 years from her reign, that we'd be still talking about this woman because of the urban legends around her and her.
Yeah, she must have had a premonition of Aquarius rising Africa, and these two chicks and all of our friends here in the chat room having these discussions about BJ chairs.
I mean, listen, if your kid is struggling with history homework, just show them a picture of that chair and just be like, let me tell you, when I don't know if I've told this story before, but when we're like in the 4th grade-ish here in America, it might be different now. That's like what, you're like 8 years old. You have to learn all 50 states and all 50 state capitals. And I was having a really hard time remembering the capital of Florida. The capital of Florida is Tallahassee. My mother, my Southern mother, finally was so frustrated with me not remembering Tallahassee that she told me that I can remember Tallahassee by the name Talawaki because Florida looks like a damn Talawaki, meaning a penis. That is how I've always remembered the capital of Florida is Tallahassee. So it works. It works.
I'm interested in this comment here, looking towards heaven for Jesus. No, Catherine likes the modern. Catherine is like the modern day pizza and hot dog pervert. Are we saying that she was a payedo? Are we saying she was a payedo?
I don't think there's no evidence that she messed with children as far as what we have. Now we're going to talk a little bit about this because when I decided to because again, you guys, we ended with Rasputin and we know he was nasty. And I decided, well, let's talk about the Anastasia Romanov conspiracy, but we got to look at the Romanovs. In my head, I thought we would do Michael, the first Romanov, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and then go ahead and skip to there's no evidence of her being a child lover. I'll just go ahead and say that. And I thought, but between Catherine and Nicholas, the guy, Anastasia's father, we have a lot of really interesting characters in between, and especially Catherine's son. So when we look at Catherine's son, after we're done with Catherine, we might see more evidence that might point to that, but still I'm trying to be very grounded at my approach to these historical people because I try to be very fair, and I think we know that as a whole, the monarchy is not good. Like as a whole, only big ones. Yeah. Well, she had a propensity to have a lot of, I hate to be like TMI, but I'm sure her hole was quite big. Let's just put it that way. Because she had a lot of exercise. She was a little stretched out, that one. So we know that there can be monarchy. There can be people in monarchy who, even though they're born into psychotic families, they themselves are not psychotic. And so I really want to put forth this idea. We can't judge someone just because of their last name, right? We can't judge someone that's the same as judging someone because of the color of their skin. That's no different, right? Or judge someone just because of their bloodline. Every single human being has their own character and has their own free will choice. And we know, Shanti knows plenty of people that were born into these families that have rejected how they were raised and put a huge target on their back in order to be whistleblowers. And so I really, as we investigate these historical people, I really hope that, even if you are in the monarchy and you're a good person, you're still probably going to be a little eccentric just because of you've
been inbred.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of money and power. Being eccentric doesn't necessarily mean you're bad, right? There's a lot of eccentric people who are quite comical and funny and great, So, but, when we look at Catherine the Great, and I go back and forth on whether I like Catherine or not, I guess it doesn't really matter if I like her. I think for us ladies in the audience, we can probably find actually a lot of ourselves in Catherine as a woman. And we're going to talk about that because there's a lot of what Catherine had to do or did in order to protect herself that I think, if Catherine had lived in today's time, I don't know if she would have the same urban legends that she has today. Right? I don't know if she would be given, because we have the whole idea of her dying because she was trying to have bestiality with a horse, which you guys, that rumor was started by her son. And we'll talk about that at the end because her son hated her. Her son hated her, which her son, to me, is even more fascinating than his mother. All right. And so we're looking at now. I want to make this clear. I've said this so many times. Like, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. If I had to live during this time, I would so much rather be a peasant, because fighting for food just seems a lot easier than what these people had to go through. And
yeah, I concur.
You're born.
I absolutely concur. I'd rather be a stable boy watching all the shenanigans.
Oh my God, like, it was a dog-eat-dog world. And especially, so when we look at Catherine the Great, or the woman known today as Catherine the Great, that was, I pretend she's my mom. I have a lot of, you know, you can say anything you want about Catherine the Great, but she was not stupid. This was a highly intelligent woman. And I started off, when I talked about this first, like, if we put ourselves in Catherine's shoes. Now, I'm kind of paraphrasing. There's this thing that people, no, Shanti, not that lady. Good. I was like, I don't know if you want Catherine to be your mama. Listen, regardless of whether she was cabal or not, like, I still don't know if I want her to be my mama, because she had to fight her whole life, basically, Catherine the Great. And okay, so when we're looking at Catherine. So Catherine was not born under the name Catherine, which we're going to talk about, because Catherine is many things and stupid ain't one of them. And if we go back and look at her life, obviously hindsight is 2020. But as you go back and look at her life, you can see these places where she's checkmating her soon-to-be husband, Peter III, the whole way through. She's playing her cards right. And something I put forward, when you're born into the gentry, you're born into a dog-eat-dog world. These people were given an education. It's kind of what we see now in our world, where, like, my generation is overeducated and underpaid. Like, I don't know anybody my age that really knows how to change a tire, you know, but we can sure do math, right? Like, I kind of see that with the gentry back then too. They learned how to survive within their royal caste, but if you put them in the middle of Siberia, they wouldn't know what to do, right? It was just a different jungle to have to fight. And as a woman, at this time of Catherine's birth, she was born on May 2nd of 1729. So at the time of her birth, you did see divorce amongst couples, especially aristocratic couples and gentry, but it was never instigated by the woman. So I ask you, my friends, to consider this, and we'll get into her status, how she was born. But imagine, my friends, that you were married to a man that repulsed you, that absolutely repulsed you. What would you do? Would you just quietly sit back and live out the days of your life, or would you eventually try to roll the dice? And what she ended up doing, I don't think in this aspect, I don't think we give her enough credit. Even though her character is questionable, if we look at these little independent things that she's been through, what she ended up doing by basically taking the throne from Peter III was a very bold move. And she could have been assassinated right away from even attempting that. So she rolled the dice. She did what she had to do. And we're going to get into that, because a lot of historians speculate, like, when did Catherine start plotting against her husband? Now, there's been lots of mini series and TV shows. Helen Mirren has played Catherine the Great. What monarchy has Helen Mirren not played at this point? I feel like Helen Mirren has played like every queen that ever existed at this point. There's a mini series.
She plays the screens quite well as well. I mean, I think some of them probably looked like her, and they were probably as smart as her as well, because she's either a queen or a detective lady. I must say, I love her detective programs, where she does British programs. Yeah.
If you watch her miniseries where she plays Catherine the Great, she plays Catherine the Great later in life, so you don't see the beginning of Catherine's life to me are way more interesting. The beginning is way more interesting than the end of her life. It starts kind of her mid-reign. But you do get to see, like, how it's kind of interesting to see how she plays her lovers. You know, in the beginning of her story, it's almost like she's using her lovers to gain power. But towards the end of Catherine's life, it's almost like her lovers are using her for power, because she becomes the empress of Russia. There's also a kind of a spin off of Catherine the Great's life called The Great, that it's with Dakota Fanning's sister plays the younger Catherine, and that guy, one of those young English actors, plays Peter the Third, and they kind of play Peter the Third as a comedy character. So there's lots of spin. That's how fascinating Catherine the Great is to us still to this day. And again, whether or not she was good or evil or somewhere in between, she is fascinating, and her life is extremely fascinating. And again, I think as women, we can kind of relate, take the cult out of it, take all that out of it. You can, I think there is some relatable qualities to Catherine that most women can probably identify with. So let's go ahead. So she was born Princess Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst. Now I have some German lineage in me, and I'm not German though, and I have no Russian in me whatsoever. So again, I apologize if these pronunciations are not correct, especially with the Russian, because I have zero Russian in me whatsoever. But she was born Princess Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst on the 2nd of May of 1729. She was born in Stettin, which is in the Kingdom of Prussia back then, which is now modern day Poland. All right, so both her and her soon-to-be husband were born of Germanic lineage. They were not born Russian. This is really important to remember, that they were not born Russian. They were not born speaking Russian. She was part of the German ruling family of Anhalt. Her father was Christian August, who was a high-ranking Persian general and governor of the city of Stettin at her birth. This means, my friends, this is quite a predicament. Because this means that her family had rank and power, but no money. No money.
Wow.
But rank and power. So I ask you, is it better to be born Catherine or Princess Sophie, or is it better to be born a peasant? At least as a peasant, you have freedom to hunt, to make bread, So at this point, we're talking about the Holy Roman Empire. Yeah? So in the Holy Roman Empire at this time, there were 300 sovereign entities making moves against each other for more power. So we have all these ruling dynasties all over the Holy Roman Empire that are having to kind of dog their way to the top for power. And so Catherine was born into this. And when I say it's dog eat dog, I mean it is dog eat dog, right? So we think about what the controllers do today in their secret world. Think about that times 10, but out in the public. Right? It just, right. It is, there's no one to protect you. It is how it is. So this is what she's born into. And so for that, I have some empathy for her just in that, from that alone. And the fact that she's a woman too. So we're talking about, even though she's a gentry woman, so therefore she has more value, she's still a woman. So she really has no say.
Right.
Right? So her real power came through her mother's line. So this is where it gets really interesting. And we're going to have to give a little bit of a backstory to both Catherine and Peter, her husband's family drama, to figure out why this became such a big deal coming into the Russian throne. So her mother was named Joanna Elizabeth of the Holstein-Gottorp family. Now, the Holstein-Gottorp family is still, my friends, a family in power today. All right. FYI. Now, it is said that her mother was ruthless and very, very abusive. It is said that her mother probably would be classified as a narcissist today. And that from what I read of her mother, I kept getting the term stage mom, like a helicopter parent. And she craved fame and was determined to get it by making her daughter Empress of Russia by having her marry her second cousin, Peter von Holstein-Gottorp. So this becomes Peter the Third. So her mother is of the Holstein-Gottorp group. Peter is her second cousin through the von Holstein-Gottorp group, but Peter is also, through another family line, the grandson of Peter the Great of Russia, who we spoke about last week. All right. So it's not the von Holstein-Gottorp group is what group? I keep calling them a group because it sounds like a group in my head. So the family, the firm, the Holstein-Gottorp firm, they're the ones that got Catherine or Princess Sophie in the door to marry Peter. But Peter's value came through the fact that he was also the grandson of Peter the Great. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, does make sense.
All right, cool. All right. So, and that's her second cousin. All right. So now let's talk about
Do we not have a picture of him? I want to just see. No, we don't.
Did I send a picture of him? He's
No, we got no. We have one of Ivan.
Her and him. I think there's one of her and him on their wedding. We can show if you want to.
G. Orlov.
Oh, that's another guy coming. So do you see Catherine and Peter? The picture of Catherine and Peter from their wedding.
There we go, Catherine and Peter.
So that's him and that's her. That's technically on their wedding day, which we'll get to. But Peter, let's kind of give a little bit of backstory on Peter von Holstein-Gotthard, who is part of this von Holstein-Gotthard family, which is still a big family in Europe today, and is also the grandson of Peter the Great. So I kind of drew a rough sketch of the family drama. I think I sent it to you on Signal. This is just mine.
Shall I put it?
Yes, let me try to explain this to you guys, because this is a battle that's been happening for a couple of episodes now. So if you guys remember, we started, so I have Aunt A up at the top. So that's Aunt Anastasia. That was the start of the Romanov line. Her nephew, Michael Romanov, after, you guys can go back a few episodes, we talked about him taking the throne. Okay, so Michael Romanov was the first Romanov. Michael Romanov, MR, had a son named Alexei Romanov. Okay, now Alexei is where we get this family drama still going on today. Now, I didn't write all the kids' names down because I'm just giving you the important kids. So AR, Alexei Romanov, had his first wife and had his second wife. And this is where, if you guys remember, where the controversy starts to happen and where the battle will intensify even for Catherine. Okay, so through Alexei Romanov, if you guys remember, had like 13 kids with his first wife, and then his first wife died after the birth of Ivan, his last son. And then Alexei married Natalia, who was his second wife, mother of Peter the Great. So the first wife of Alexei died. She wasn't divorced from him. She wasn't sent to a monastery. She passed away. So if we're looking at church authority, both of these wives have equal standing because the first one passed away. So they're both in equal standing with the Romanov family. Now the second wife, Natalia, had Peter the Great and a couple of girls. All right. So if you remember, Ivan, the last son of Alexei, and Peter the Great, the first son of Natalia, half brothers, were co-czars for a while. And the sister of Ivan, the full sister of Ivan, half sister of Peter, the real brute of a woman, was their regent. Again, that's drama in itself. Go back and watch those episodes if you guys missed that. So we have, if you see, I have Peter the Great and Ivan, both sons of Alexei. Then Peter the Great, as we spoke about last week, had his son Alexei, that he named Alexei as well, Romanov. Alexei had a son named Peter, which became Peter the Second. Alexei was the one, AR, under Peter the Great, where it says AR, he was assassinated by his father. Remember that from last week? Peter the Great was a horrific human being. Peter the Great also had multiple girls. Now, I put a couple of X's there, but then I put EE. EE is going to be Empress Elizabeth, which we're going to get back to. Now, Ivan, who passed away at 29 years old and left Peter the sole czar, had daughters. Well, remember I said last week that the birth of Alexei from Peter the Great secured Peter's mother's line on the throne because it was a boy versus the girls that Ivan had. But the issue with Ivan is that Ivan's daughters are going to have sons. Okay, that's the value of a woman, right? At this time, is they're bargaining chips and they have a uterus. All right. Now, Peter the Great also made a mistake that not necessarily a mistake, but it's what allowed what's going to happen is that when Peter the Great died, he anointed his second wife, Catherine the First. Her original name was Marta, and she took the name Catherine, Ekaterina. He made her empress. So after Peter the Great dies, we have 4 czars in a 16-year span. Talk about chaos. 4 czars. Wow. So we have Catherine the First, Peter's wife, second wife, who is going to be the mother of Empress Elizabeth and the mother of Peter the Third's mother, which we'll get to. She is now the Empress of Russia after Peter dies. Now Empress Catherine the First does not have an education. She doesn't know how to read. She doesn't know how to write. For all intent and purpose, this woman is not suited for political life. She is a ancient Paris Hilton. She's a socialite. So for 2 years after her husband dies, where she's the empress, all she does, bless her heart, sounds like fun to me. She just parties for 2 years. She just parties. She spends money. She drinks. She eats. She has a bunch of lovers. And then she dies. When she dies, because of the rules of succession, the crown now has to go to Alexei, the dead son's son, Peter II. So you see I have Peter II under AR. Peter II only lives till the age of 14 and he dies. So he has no heirs. So then if you look under Ivan's name, I have an A there. Empress Anna. Empress Anna comes in, who's Ivan's daughter, because we already have the example of Catherine being an empress. Now the daughters are like, hey, we have a shot at this. So Empress Anna comes in and takes the throne. After Empress, she doesn't rule for that long. After she dies, she leaves the throne to Ivan VI, her nephew. And this is the last of Ivan's great-grandchildren, is Ivan VI, okay? Well, this is fascinating, my friends, because they call him the infant emperor. I think I have a picture of him, Shanti, Ivan VI. And it's really important because this is going to come up later when I'm telling you guys this drama, this family drama, because this is going to come up later in Catherine's reign as well, Ivan VI. Ivan VI is going to be a little bit of a problem. He's an infant. He's so cute. He's so cute. And if anybody in this story got the raw end of the deal and got the abuse, it's this child. Because this baby, who is Ivan's line, so through the first wife's line through, goes again back to Alexei, he is then deposed as a baby by Empress Elizabeth, the EE I had if we go back to the chart. So Empress Elizabeth is the daughter of Peter the Great and Catherine the First. All right. So she deposes Ivan VI as an infant. How hard is it to depose an infant? You just pick him up out of his crib and remove him, right? And she has him locked up with his family. So for his whole life, he is kept basically in a jail cell. And he's only taught to read the Bible. He's taught nothing of the outside world. He is just abused. So Empress, if you see EE, I have up there, she is now on the throne. Now, because of this Game of Thrones, this drama between this family, every time somebody gets on the throne, there is nervousness for another coup to happen because we have these two lines, right? These two Romanov lines that are legitimately, because the first wife died, they're legitimate lines to the throne. So Empress Elizabeth needs to secure an heir as soon as possible to secure herself on the throne. Empress Elizabeth allegedly never had children, which we're going to talk about. There's some conspiracies around that we'll get to later. So Empress Elizabeth's sister, one of the exes I put there, it's not really important, had Peter von Holstein-Gottorp. So Peter von Holstein-Gottorp, who becomes Peter III, was her nephew. Her sister died like a few weeks after he was born. That happened a lot. And so Elizabeth assigned Peter von Holstein-Gottorp as her heir. So we have a security. This is so important, as we learned from Peter the Great and Ivan, that there is a secure succession. So Ivan VI can't have a coup and take the throne back. All right. So Peter von Holstein-Gottorp, who is also second cousins with Princess Sophie, who becomes Catherine the Great. Does that make sense? I know yeah. It's really confusing. All right. It's so, I mean, listen, you guys, just be grateful this is not your family. Can you imagine family reunions? Can you imagine like Christmases at that family house? Like,
I don't think they had family reunions.
I mean, y'all, it's not your enemy. It's not people outside of your family you got to fear. It's your freaking cousins you got to fear, right? And it all comes back again to Alexei because he had these two wives that were legitimate wives with legitimate lines, right? So Empress Elizabeth, who is the daughter of Catherine the First, Empress Catherine, and Peter the Great, is on the throne now. And she has decided that her nephew, Peter von Holstein-Gottorp, he doesn't become the third until he is crowned the Tsar. So he's Peter von Holstein-Gottorp is her heir. So Peter von Holstein-Gottorp is probably the most eligible bachelor in all of Europe at this point. His stock value has gone up. And so Joanna, Princess, now she's Princess Sophie. Her mother is eagerly trying to arrange this marriage through the help of Frederick the Great of Prussia. Be grateful we don't live in these arranged marriages today, my friends. Like, just be grateful you just had a few bad breakups in college, had some broken hearts, and you got to marry someone you love, because this is some bullshit. Let me tell you, this is why I have empathy for Sophie, who becomes Catherine. I know that gets confusing. All right. So Peter was born, he was only a year older than Catherine, which is actually kind of unique. They're basically the same age. Usually we see a huge age gap between the monarch, right? But for Peter and Catherine, they're basically the same age. They're only a year apart. And she's Princess Sophie at this time. She meets her second cousin when she's 10 and he's 11. That's the first time she meets him, and she's immediately repulsed by him. Now, I have to give fairness where fairness is due. She's a 10-year-old little girl. He's an 11-year-old. My nephew's 11. At 11 years old, boys are kind of stinky. They're kind of rough. You know, I can understand a 10-year-old girl isn't thinking about, you know, she might play house, but to be told this is your future husband and here's this stinky boy who just wants to play with his toys. He loved his toy soldiers, which are kind of like our G.I. Joes today, right? Which we'll talk more about. She did not like him at all, but she is definitely picked to be his future wife. Now, Peter von Holstein Goddard, not Peter III yet, is known to be a little immature, not super bright and cool. He just sounds like a spoiled brat. Okay, so there's not a lot of people who really like Peter. All right, so in 1742, when Peter is 14 years old, he is moved from the Germanic monarchy, but Prussia at the time, the Germanic territory, to Russia at 14 years old, because he's basically going to have to now apprentice under his aunt. He's going to have to start studying under his aunt because he is the heir to the throne. Now, Peter, being a douchebag little teenage boy from the get-go, is very problematic and very hard to deal with. He refuses to learn Russian. He calls the Russian people names. He calls them backwater, basically calls them rednecks, like we would say today, white trash, whatever you want. He's very dismissive of these people that he's about to eventually rule. So, you know, this is kind of panicking the Boyers. We have to give some space for him being a teenager. You know, he is uprooted from his house and brought to this whole other, you know, I'm sure that's traumatizing in itself to have to be uprooted like this, you know, and he's also very spoiled. Well, a year later, Princess Sophie, soon to become Catherine, also is moved to Russia. She's also moved with her mother. They're not married yet, but she's under the contract of engagement. And so she is also moved to Russia to start learning the court etiquette of Russia. This is where I say she starts to checkmate Peter, because unlike Peter, and we can say it's because girls mature faster than boys, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to say, she starts to learn Russian. In fact, she is notoriously staying up all night, really making a priority to learn the Russian language, which she does. In fact, she gets very sick because she doesn't get a lot of sleep, because she really takes it upon herself to learn the language, to learn the culture. At this point, Prussia, the Germanic area, it's not Germany yet, they're very Lutheran in their beliefs. And we have the Orthodox Russian Church. Well, Sophia, Princess Sophie, decides to become a Russian Orthodox. She's basically declaring herself to be a Russian national. She's turning her back on Germany, and she's taking on this Russian personality. She is sworn into the Russian Orthodox Church on the 28th of June, 1744. And this is where she takes on the name Ekaterina, or Catherine. Now, this is the second checkmate, my friends, because she picked the name Catherine after Peter's grandmother, Empress Catherine I, and Empress Elizabeth's mother. So this is the second checkmate. When we look back, we can see her just ticking she's already seeing that the people don't like Peter, but the people are liking her. because she has become one of them. She's taking on Empress Catherine's name. She's learning the language. She's learning the court etiquette. She's declared herself to be a Russian now. So she is winning a lot of persuasion with not only the boors, the aristocrats, but with the people too. She's smart. She's very smart, whereas Peter's still a spoiled brat playing with his toy soldiers. All right. Now, when they got married, so they got married on the 21st of August, 1745. She was 16. He was 17. Now, this I found very fascinating. And this is where I kind of feel bad for Peter. As royalty goes, they have their own private physicians, right? So these private physicians told Empress Elizabeth that Peter was not ready for marriage, meaning he had not hit puberty yet, that he could not father a child yet because he had not hit puberty. But Empress Elizabeth, because of the uncertainty of the throne and the Game of Thrones and the bloody battle happening between the lines, needed for not only Peter to be the heir, but needed for Peter to have an heir to really secure. Yeah. So she decided they were going to get married anyway. So we have, for all intent and purposes, a little boy marrying a teenage girl, even though he's a year older than her. So they get married. Then they have the bedroom ceremony, which they did back then, where you basically watched the royal couple have sex for the first time. So how horrifying is that? So Catherine gets tucked into bed. Peter, on his wedding night, gets so drunk that he shows up hours late and passes out. I actually don't blame him, because if he's not ready for this, if he's still a little boy, I mean, he got his hands on alcohol. It's a different time. I can kind of see the stress that he was under, especially if he's not mature physically. He can't basically he can't salute.
You know. And even if he can, he doesn't know what to do with it.
Yes, no, he does. And there's also and I found this really sad. There's also speculation that he had phimosis. Do you know what that is? Phimosis? Do you anybody? I did not know this, and I'm not a man, nor do I have a nephew, but this is out of my rounds of knowledge. So phimosis basically means it's a medical condition that means you have a really tight foreskin. So for men that have this, it's rare that have this. It means that having, saluting with your member, that, pitching
is not a very pleasant thing.
No, it's very painful. And they speculate that even Louis XVI had this, and that's why it took Marie Antoinette and him so long to have babies, because you can't have a baby without this, right? So not only are we looking at a very immature man, but we're also looking at somebody who might have had a health condition that caused a lot of pain, which today I'm assuming the answer to that would be circumcision. Today, I think that they could easily fix that today. And I think any parent would want that fixed if that was the situation with their son. I know if I was a mother of a son and that was happening, I would want that fixed so that he didn't have to deal with that. So I just wanted to put that out there. So there could have been good reason as to why Peter von Holstein-Gotthard was not the best of husbands at this point. So as time goes on, they're married. We have Elizabeth Empress is still on the throne, but Catherine and Peter are married, and there is so much stress about Catherine getting pregnant. Like, there's so much pressure on Catherine to get pregnant. And so Empress Elizabeth decides that what they need is basically a sex therapist. Back then, what they would call like a sex therapist. And it's not Peter that needs it. Of course, it's never the man's fault, right? It's Catherine who needs it. Catherine needs this woman. She's going to find, nowadays we have people who are licensed to do this. No, Empress Elizabeth finds the woman who has had the most babies in court, the woman who is always pregnant, because obviously she knows how to get a man excited. And so she sends this woman to Catherine to teach Catherine how to seduce her husband. How, first of all, hysterical that she picked the woman who was always pregnant. You know, sometimes common sense does go a long way. So I will give her that. Obviously, this woman was very fertile and was obviously having sex a lot to always be pregnant. So she sends this woman to Catherine. And of course, she tells Catherine that obviously Catherine cannot get Peter to sleep with her, be intimate with her, because she's not praying enough. Now, bless Catherine's heart, as we say down here in the South. This woman had already learned to speak Russian, where Peter never did. She had already changed religions, basically. She had done everything she was supposed to do, and now it's still her fault. It's still her fault that Peter will not sleep with her like a husband should. So she has Catherine doing these prayer rituals. And then this woman is so frustrated that she decides that she's just going to lock Peter and Catherine in the bedroom for hours and hours at a time. And back in this days, guys, and it's still this, I think it's still true with monarchs today. The wife and the husband did not share a bedroom. They had their own apartments, right? We see this. I think Elizabeth II and Philip never had their own bedroom. You know, they had their own apartments, which sounds kind of nice, actually. So the fact that they were locked into these bedrooms together, and the complaint was Catherine would complain that all that Peter would do all night was play with his toy soldiers, basically his GI Joes. He would play with his GI Joes all night. Well, we already had the physician telling Empress Elizabeth that Peter he had not gone through puberty yet. And the fact that we had these records that he played with his toy soldiers all night tells me he was not ready at this point for intimacy with a woman. So basically at this point, the sex therapist, and this is where a lot of the rumors start with Catherine. At this point, the sex therapist pulls Catherine aside. We're in dire straits at this point. She needs to get pregnant. So the sex therapist is like, you know, it's really not going to be that bad if you just took on a lover, because we need to get you pregnant. So a lover is picked for Catherine. And this is a man named Sergei Saltykov. And so, or Sergei Saltykov. He becomes Catherine's first lover. So I want you guys to consider that. Catherine, even though she was repulsed by her husband, she's a young girl at this time. She's not thinking about having an affair. It's persuaded to her to do this, and a man is given to her. She doesn't even get to pick. Again, she doesn't get to pick. A man is given to her by this person. I call her a sex therapist. That wasn't her title, but and it's believed that maybe Empress Elizabeth was the one that permitted it because she's so desperate to have an heir to the heir. All right. So that's not really, so when I look at that with what happened to Catherine, I'm like, is this fair? Because if we're looking at a 16-year-old girl and all these things are happening to her and she's trying her very best just to survive and there's nothing she can do, is it really her fault that these rumors started by this one affair that she was basically told to have, right? So I have a little bit of empathy for her with this situation. So she becomes, our Sergei Saltykov becomes her lover for many years. Now, on October 1, 1754, 9 years into the marriage with Peter, Catherine gives birth to Paul, her son. Now, this is 9 years into the marriage, you guys. So when they got married, Peter was 17. This 17-year-old boy is now a 26-year-old man. And there are still historians who debate on whether Sergei was the father of Paul or whether Peter was the father of Paul. I believe Peter was the father of Paul, which we'll get into next week. There's many indicators to say he was actually, there's a lot of evidence and support that Peter was actually the father of Paul, because now we're looking 9 years in. So she was having sex with both of these guys, right? Because in the meantime, Catherine has fallen in love with Sergei, as a girl would do. This is a young girl. She's 16. She's 25 when she gives birth to Paul. You know, this man is coming and showing her attention. She's in a terrible situation. She's repulsed by her husband. He annoys her. And she's been given this alternative man that she does fall in love with. She doesn't realize.
Paul.
No, that's Paul. Yeah, that's Paul. I didn't send a picture of Sergei, but that's Paul. That's her son, Paul, which we are going to go into after we finish Catherine. It might take us a couple of weeks to get through Catherine because she's such a scandalous person. But that is Paul. So finally, she has the baby. Now, in the meantime, she falls in love with Sergei, like I said, but she doesn't realize, because she's young and naive, She doesn't realize that she's not Sergei's only lover. She's under the impression she's confusing, as they say, girls play on sex to get love, boys play on love to get sex. That old adage. She's fallen prey to this. So when she finally gives birth to Paul, it's very horrific what happens to Catherine. I'm not going to take this away from her. As much as people might despise her, and if she gets involved in the occult in her life, I don't know. But in these little instances, I do have pain for her. I've been that 25. Well, I've never had a child, but I've been that 25-year-old girl. I've been that 16-year-old girl. You know, and I can't imagine the stress, the anxiety, the pain, the depression that she was probably under. So she gives birth to Paul. Paul then is taken by Empress Elizabeth because she's so excited. Now she has the heir to the heir. So now it is like for certain, for real, she's now secure on the throne. So she takes Paul from Catherine and raises Paul by herself. Catherine has no really communication with her son. Can you imagine, ladies in the chat, and even for me, I've never had a child, but I cannot imagine giving birth. She gives birth basically by herself with some midwives. She doesn't have Peter in there to support her. She doesn't have Sergei in there to support her. She has no one in there to support her but these midwives. She has this horrific birth with no painkillers whatsoever. The minute the baby, the umbilical cord is cut, Empress Elizabeth comes in and whisks the baby away from her to raise Paul to be the czar in training, right? So she's had her baby taken from her. She learns that she's not Sergei's only lover. She can't stand her husband, the person that she's been saddled to for the rest of her life. And now you would think that she's finally given a son to this family, that she has basically accomplished everything she was supposed to. She has held up her end of the deal, but she's gotten nothing in return. So it takes Catherine a while to recover from this birth. Now, I'm telling you guys, Catherine was very smart. I would be curious to know her IQ. Very smart woman. So while she's laying in bed recovering from this birth, pissed off, angry, depressed, heaven knows what kind of postpartum depression she was going through not having her baby. Can you imagine having that baby taken from you? Your body hurts. Your breasts are filled with milk. You probably feel when your baby's crying, but you can't hear him because he's been taken from you. And
it's so interesting because, sorry to interrupt you, it's just so interesting, you know, when you're dealing with people with like a lot of the forced adoptions right now as well. It's such a similar thing, you know, the babies get taken. And also with a lot of the SRA survivors, remember their first child is usually a sacrifice, and depending on what it is, that child will often get killed in front of them.
Yeah, so, I don't think we're going to talk. And I just said, so looking towards heaven for Jesus, even if Peter was 12, then that would put Catherine at 11 because Catherine was a year younger than him. So they were age appropriate for each other for sure. They were only a year apart. And I don't know if Paul is a white hat, Jessica. Paul is fascinating. Paul has got some mental issues. And like I said, I was going to just go from when I was thinking about doing the Romanov conspiracy with Anastasia, I was going to go Michael, then to Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and then to the czars and Rasputin that go back to those. But all these people in between Catherine and the Nicholas II are so interesting. We're going to look at them and Paul's son, Alexander, is super interesting too. We're talking about some very, very interesting stories with these people. But Paul, I have a lot of empathy for Paul. I can't imagine the trauma, the undiagnosed trauma that Paul went through from being ripped from his mother. Paul is going to have an intense hatred for his mother as he gets older, which we'll talk about, because I think that this whole situation of his birth shifted both of them. I mean, he was a baby, so this was how he kind of came out, but it definitely shifted her. And I think it's going to be very telling with their relationship going forward, even when he's grown, because, you know, as a child, even if, you know, sometimes emotions and logic are two different things. So even if you know logically that you were ripped from your mother and it wasn't your mother's fault, the emotion of that happening and that subconscious abandonment feeling, babies need their moms. They need to be nursed by their moms. They need to be held by their moms. They need to have skin-on-skin contact with their moms. We know this now. And he was taken immediately from his mother and raised by his great aunt. Okay. So, and this does change Catherine. Catherine goes from being a very complicit woman, young girl, just doing what she needs to do, to being very defiant. And during her recovery time is where we see this, you know, for me, this is, you know, a lot of historians debate on when she started scheming to take over from her husband, to take the throne from her husband. I don't think we can pinpoint a specific time where the idea was formed, because I think this is just kind of a snowball of just things that are mounting on top of each other of stress. And at some point, I think there was something within Catherine that kind of snaps, where it's either kill or be killed. And that's just kind of my opinion on the matter, because we know, you know, eventually she has a full-on plot to take him out. But at this point, Empress Elizabeth is still alive. So Peter's not even on the throne yet. So I think she's this momentum of just anger and hurt and pain within her as a human being. She grew up with an abusive mother too, is just building, right? And she's 25. Y'all know she's about to go through her Saturn return. This is probably the beginning of her Saturn return. So I think as women, or as people in general, I think even the men in the audience can have, and that's how we heal from this cabal, right? We don't behave like they do. We can sit back and say, yes, your actions are atrocious, but we can actually have empathy for you too, and have understanding, and see you as a human being that's just trying to survive. And that's kind of how I take the approach with Catherine. At the end of Catherine's life, I don't really like her that much. But at this point in her life, I can feel empathy for her. Oh, but by the grace of God go I. I have no idea what I would do in this situation. This is a horrible situation to be in. But nonetheless, while she's recovering from this birth, she starts reading these papers, these essays, these books written by the famous Voltaire, the French Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. And so she starts to use her intellect to figure out a way to rule. Okay, at this point, she actually becomes a pen pal of Voltaire, which is quite fascinating. They were pen pals throughout the rest of her life, the rest of his life. And even though they never met in person, it is said that when he passed away, she was very greatly affected by him passing away. So we're talking about a very smart, clever philosophy. I love philosophy, but philosophy is complicated, especially when you're talking about this age, this time period we're in, where we're moving from a feudal system to a more quote unquote enlightened, which I don't know how enlightened it is, which we're going to get to, because she does have some weird beliefs, which we'll get to probably next week when she is ruling. We'll probably get to her ruling, or her takeover for the end of this show, and the next week talk about her ruling. So all right. Now, Peter, so let me look. So on Christmas Eve of 1761, so 1761, Christmas Eve, everything shifts for Peter and Catherine, because Empress Elizabeth has a massive stroke. Empress Elizabeth passes away, I've got so many notes here, on January 5th of 1762. She was 52 years old, just like her father. So now Peter has ascended to the throne as Peter III, and Catherine is his Empress consort, right? So that means, Kate Middleton is the consort. So that means she's only the Empress through the marriage to Peter, not on her own standing. That's what consort means. All right. So when Peter was hated by the court. He was hated by his people. He would drill his soldiers until the early morning hours. He was very abusive to his soldiers. He was a drunkard. He was an alcoholic. I love the word drunkard. I feel like that's such an old-fashioned word. He was a drunkard. He was an alcoholic, you guys. He got a taste of the whiskey when he was really little and forced to do things he didn't want to do, and he never quite gave that up. He would do things like go into Catherine's apartments in the very early morning hour with his quartet of music and play to wake her up and disturb her. I mean, this was a total raging psychopath. Right? Like
he got the serenading part a little bit wrong. This is not how you serenade someone.
No.
And a little bit more gentleness is required.
He was like this, he just turned into a raging spoiled brat. Like he literally you know, and we also have now there's been multiple 7 years, quote unquote, 7 years wars. We had one, like there's multiple, but in this time period, there was another 7 years war going on between Prussia and Russia and all different, I'm not a military expert, but there's a big war going on for territory. And the big enemies, the big combating empires are Prussia and Russia. And remember, my friends, this is why this is important. Peter and Catherine by birth are Germanic. They are Prussian. But Catherine gave her allegiance to Russia early on. Peter never did. Peter called them rednecks, basically. Even when he's the czar, he looks down on the Russian people. He's very pro-Prussia. I laugh because he would insult Catherine by calling her a backwards child bride, which I think is hysterical. I could not stop laughing. Could you imagine getting married and having your husband call you a backwater child bride, like a redneck child bride? Right? So he's calling her a redneck. He's calling all the people of Russia rednecks. He's so much better than the Russian people. So granted, in this time between the friction between Catherine and Peter, the Boyers, as well as the people of Russia, suffice it to say, they really like Catherine. They don't like Peter. And Peter, when he goes low, she goes high. She starts to do something that was so just off culture. She actually starts to be super nice to the servants. Imagine that. Imagine showing humanity to the servants in the house. When Peter's doing psychotic things to them and annoying them, she's going behind and taking care of them. Are you okay? What can I do for you? This to me is strategic. She's checkmating him again. This whole time, she's outwitting her bombastic husband. She's doing everything right. Even after the whole Paul being taken, except when Paul was taken away from her, she got mad. So not only is she doing everything right, but she's doing everything right and she's mad now. Now, we also, the good things that Peter did, let's give a few of the good things he did, just to be fair. He did proclaim religious freedom. He did abolish the secret police, which was created by Ivan the Terrible. If you remember back from our first episode on the Romanovs, they were known for their extreme. The witch, that Ivan the second wife, who created the secret police that were violent, Peter got rid of them. Peter was like, I'm the only violent man in this country. So he abolishes them, and he made it illegal for landowners to kill their serfs without going to court first, which this is important because we're going to get into serfdom. And I guess next week's episode, we'll get into serfdom, because serfdom and all those people that say white people have never been enslaved. Well, this is totally blows that out of the water, because we're going to talk about the serfs next week. All right. So Peter only ruled as czar for like 5 months. 5 months, my friends. So let's talk about what happened, because what Catherine did was so ballsy and so girl boss. It shocked. It sent like ricochets all over the world what she did. So I guess for female empowerment, yay. You know, if we just look at this one instance of what she did. So let's talk about what happened. What happened? So Peter left St. Petersburg with his German-born courtiers to go on vacation back in Prussia to visit family. So I'm assuming the Holstein-Goddard family. He went back to visit family, his German family, for vacation. Darling, you've only been working the job for 5 months and you got to go on vacation already? Like, what?
That's over there.
I mean, it can't be that hard. Like, what? You go for 5 months and you're like, I need a vacation. And back then when they went away for a while, right? Because they had to load up carriages and all that kind of stuff. Catherine strategically decides to stay behind. So Catherine is smart again. She's like, no, I'm going to stay with our Russian people. I'm going to stay behind. Well, on July 8th, Catherine is told that one of her supporters has been arrested by Peter. And if she wants a coup, she has to move now. So this tells me that she was planning a coup. She had been planning for a hot second, but her timeline gets moved up because Peter catches wind and arrests one of her supporters. So, Catherine, the next morning, goes left for, and I'm probably going to totally butcher this name, the Ishmailovsky regiment. So the Ishmailovsky regiment was this group, kind of like a secret service, this group of military supporters that was established by Empress Anna. You guys remember her from the beginning? To basically protect the royal family. Okay. So she goes to them and she pleads. They're the Imperial Russian Guard, and she pleads for them to protect her from her husband. Now, my friends, this was where the tides changed for all of history, because what she was asking them to do was technically treason. Because remember, she's the Empress consort. She's not the Romanov. Her husband's the Romanov. She's given birth to her child who's a Romanov. She's not the Tsar. She's the consort. So the Imperial Guard's priority is the Tsar, not his wife. So very easily, they could have been, nope, and they could have assassinated her right there for committing treason against her husband. But because, lucky for her, her husband was such a douchebag, the guards were like, okay, we're going to take our shot. We're going to protect you against your husband. Now, with this being said, they were under the impression that that meant Catherine would act as regent for Paul until Paul became of age. LOL. Did we not learn anything from Princess Sophia back with Ivan and Peter the Great? No Russian woman, fair applause to the Russian woman, is just going to act as a regent. They're going to take she had no intention of being the regent for her son. She was going to rule, and then when she died, her son would become the next emperor. But that's not what the military thought at the time. Now, at this time, she's also started an affair with Grigory Orlov, and that's the G. Orlov picture I sent you, Shanti. So this is really important. He's a high-ranking military official, and you have to also remember that at this point, Catherine has started to use her.
I've got an A Orlov here. Oh, hang on, there's a G too. Hang on.
A we'll get to in a minute, because his brother is Alexei Orlov. And so this guy becomes really important for Catherine. She starts to pick her lovers strategically. Her heart's been broken. She is picking her lovers strategically. These are high-ranking military Russian officials. She's a little old woman. She's not going to be able to go into battle, but if she has the right lovers, they're going to go into battle for her. So the Orlov brothers, Grigory and Alexei, become very important to Catherine's reign. Okay, so after the Ishmailovsky regiment decides to protect Catherine, we got that off our back. She goes to these barracks where there's a clergyman ready to ordain her Empress Catherine II. And they do this on the grounds that she is now the sole occupant of the Russian throne, because Peter went back to Germany or Prussia and showed his allegiance towards the enemy, basically committed treason.
Oh, wow.
So they put Catherine as the sole occupant of the Russian throne, as Empress Catherine II, who would later be known as Catherine the Great. She then had her husband arrested for treason and forced him to sign an abdication document. So now she has it documented that he has abdicated his throne to his wife, Catherine. Again, the world is shocked by this. This was the shot heard around the world. Now, if we look at what's interesting too, if we look at what was happening, revolution is everywhere in this point, and this point in time. The placement of Mars and Pluto are the same placements then as they are now, right? That's what's so freaking weird. Right? And so interesting. We have the French Revolution, we have the Haitian Revolution, we have the American Revolution. It's all building up to around this time. So there is revolution everywhere. But in Russia, it's a woman leading the way. That's not the same in the other countries. So this is what, like, everybody around the world went, oh, a woman has done this. Okay. So July 17th, 1762, Peter is found dead in prison. Peter III. No one knows for sure how he was assassinated, but it is commonly believed that he was killed by Alexei Orlov, which I think I sent you the picture A. Orlov, which is brother to Grigory Orlov. Now, 2 years later, we'll end with this, because I know we're over an hour now. So, and then we can pick up with her her ruling.
So this right here is the assassin then.
He's going to kill quite a few people for Catherine. Let's just put it that way. There's going to be quite a few people that are going to pop up.
But is she having a fling with both brothers then?
No, as far as we know, just with Grigori. But she's the most powerful woman in Russia. And if you're boinking the most powerful, if your brother is boinking the most powerful woman in Russia,
you get to do the little odd side jobs, don't you?
You get a lot of accommodations and a lot of titles. Now, at this point, Catherine will never go
there
on.
She is. There the lady is.
There she is. Catherine will never go on to take another husband, which was another concern and probably where some of the urban legends also came from, which we'll get into next week, some more of them. But I can understand why she never took another husband. It's the same thing with Queen Elizabeth I. I think she had been so scorned by her first husband, and because she got to the throne through marriage, I think she was terrified that if she married another man, that it would compromise her power. That's my belief. Yeah. So especially in that time period. Now, Catherine would only go on to have about 10 to like 15 boyfriends in the whole entirety of her life. And honestly, I've had more. So honestly, like, not to slut shame myself, but I've had more. So I don't know if she was, I mean, we'll talk about the furniture again next week and some of the rumors, but with the number of men, I don't see that as being any different than a lot of women today, right?
No, I think, especially not if you're looking at the hookup culture today.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I think part of the rumors were infested and grew because she wasn't married, because she never took another husband, right? So, but I kind of know why. But let's talk about one more instance let's go back to Ivan VI. So remember the infant emperor that Empress Elizabeth had deposed and taken into captivity. Well, she had made a law that if anybody was ever going to try to free him, or if there was any coup, that he was to be killed immediately. So at this point, Ivan VI is 23 years old. So 2 years into her reign, 1764, the gentry are starting to figure out that Catherine doesn't really plan on being regent for Paul, that she's just going to keep ruling. Now, again, Catherine II is not a Romanov. She's given birth to a Romanov, but she herself is not a Romanov, and she's a woman. So within the gentry, there becomes a plan to free Ivan VI. Now, Ivan VI, the records say that even though he was kept in captivity his whole life, he was mentally stunted, but not as much as you would think. Like, he still had knowledge of who he was, that he was a Romanov and that he was the sovereign. He called himself the sovereign. And so with that being said, I think people felt like they could free him, put him back on the throne, and that they could go on back to normal life. Well, in 1764, there was a planned coup, and his throat was slit right away. So there will be another person that we'll talk about next week. I'm going to put a little star by it that's going to pop up. That's also going to be a challenger to Catherine's throne. I know we're over an hour now, so I felt like ending with Ivan VI's murder by Catherine. So this law was put in by Empress Elizabeth, but was reinstated by Catherine. So
she took out her bloodline, actually.
She took it down her husband's bloodline because her son is still alive. Actually, let's end on one more thing. I sent you the picture. So let's end with her coronation. So Catherine was officially coronated. She was already ordained, but now she's got the crown put on her head in Moscow.
You want the crown? What? You want to put the crown?
Yes, because this is important. This is the crown on the 22nd of September, 1762. So 2 years before Ivan was killed. So this marks the creation of the imperial crown of Russia, is considered one of the main treasures of the Romanov dynasty. You can now see it at one of the museums in Moscow, but I wanted to show that because this is the last emperor that we talk about, Nicholas II, who's going to die with his children, Anastasia, Rasputin's gang. We'll show a picture of him when we get to him wearing the same crown. So this is a very famous crown. The two sides show the East and the West, because Russia really does include Western and Eastern Europe together, joined as one. I do think it's interesting that the color red is in there. I don't want to look too deeply into that, but we know red does, in a lot of occult situations, does mimic the blood shed of those sacrificed. I don't want to look too into that, though. It might just be they like the color red. Maybe some people more in the know of the Russian monarchy would know for sure why they picked the red color to be inside the crown. But just like the crown jewels of England, where you can go to the Tower of London to see the crown jewels of England, you can now as well go and see the crown. This crown is on display at a museum in Moscow. So let's end with her coronation and the murdering of Ivan VI, and we'll pick up there next week because there's some really, really interesting things that happen in her reign that I can't wait to talk about, because we have some implications that she makes that affect us today in our society. So yeah, it's a big one, guys. She's interesting. What do you think so far, Shanti? What's your assessment so far?
Yeah, getting seriously juicy. Yeah, she was obviously a lady that took no nonsense from anyone. That's for sure. And as you say, strategic, very smart. I mean, in those days, for a woman to be ruling Russia, you had to be very smart. You had to be very strategic. You pretty much had to know what the heck was what on every level, right? And I find that read interesting as well, because I remember also interviewing, I think we might have mentioned it before, Lera Nikolaev a couple of months back. And she was also one of these kids, in the system, but she was taken by the Russians and programmed by the Russians. And she talks about, and it makes a lot of sense, because pretty much how much blood equity. So what gives these guys power is the blood equity, the sacrifices, the blood sacrifices that is literally in the land. So Russia's had a lot of blood equity over the years, which makes them one of the most powerful countries, but pretty much on the planet, right? I don't know, how. And what she was also saying, interestingly enough, it's different to America, the way that the programming happens there in the SRA. This is very much technology based, very, very much technology. So it's blood and technology. Very interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I can't wait for you guys to hear, because Catherine the Great, kind of like Peter the Great, is given a lot of credit for really growing the empire of Russia in a very big way. And I can see on the outskirt why it would look that way. Now, Catherine, from what I can tell, was not as brutal as Peter the Great. From what we know, she only killed people that were threatening to her.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't seem to me like she was that bloodthirsty, but she would have had no qualms taking somebody out if they
threatened her.
Yeah, if they were getting up to shenanigans on her turf. She was like, hey, this one.
Yeah, she was not out to, I don't think she found joy in killing people. I don't think that was like where Peter, I felt like Peter the Great, I felt like he kind of felt he got off on killing people.
Yeah. I think a lot of the psychopaths do, women are not necessarily always like that, a woman, although when women get like that, they're bad. I'm not going to mince any words around that, but I definitely think that women are different in the way that they rule or govern or stuff like that. They would rather negotiate before they go to war.
Yeah, and negotiate she did. We're going to talk about that, because she was definitely a trafficker in another kind of context, which we'll talk about next week as well when it comes to the serfs.
Trafficker? What was she trafficking? Give us a tip.
People. She was trafficking serfs. We'll talk about that. There's a lot to talk about. So there's a lot with this woman. And now, but what the answer was, I don't know, because we're also looking at the historical. They say what's the they say about history. History is like another country. They do things differently there, and in some ways, like what she did was horrific. And human beings are not collateral. Like they're human beings. But she kind of got herself in a bit of a situation, because she was basically bargaining serfs, so people, for support. And so when it
that's probably what looking towards heaven for Jesus. That's probably what you're saying there about that. Maybe it was not so much the pedophilia, but more the trafficker, the human trafficker.
Yeah, and we have to though give a little bit of, I feel like a little bit of grace though, because this was common back then. Like serfdom, it wasn't like she created serfdom; it had been around for centuries, right? She just kind of kept it going. when there was
you didn't have to participate, you know.
Right, and there was, you know, she herself owned like 500,000. She owned 500,000 serfs. So these are slaves, for lack of a better word. These are slaves. So white slaves. And the Russia as a country owned 2.8 billion slaves.
She had 500,000 of them. That's just
and
shocking.
She would bargain. We'll get into the children a little bit, looking towards heaven for Jesus. I have a whole graph. I can kind of explain the way the laws of serfdom, because remember, her husband, Peter III, had made a law that it was illegal for a landowner to kill a serf without going to court first. So we started to see some reform, and there's big, you know, we're looking at, like, if we look at for the Americans in the audience, if we look at through the context of American history. So out of all the countries in the world, the United States of America had slavery for the least amount of time, because before 1776, we weren't a country, we were governed by Great Britain. So all slavery coming through America at that time was governed by the crown. Once we gained our independence, 1776, the American Revolution began. We really weren't on our feet until 1790. So we only had slavery for 70 years. And even before the American Revolution, there were abolitionists. So even before then, now as serfs, we're looking at the same thing. It's still slavery, even though it's just white people. It's still the same thing. So we see this age of reason, this age of enlightenment, where people are like, maybe it's not right to own other human beings. Like, maybe there's some problems. So we're looking at a lot of friction.
I'd say that's probably something. But I'm glad we've evolved. Have we really evolved since then? I don't even know.
I mean, we don't openly own people, but people secretly own people. So, so when we look at Catherine, a lot of the serfs she had, I think she kind of inherited. And so I do kind of give her a little bit of grace in the fact that this was the time period. And so she was dealing with inherited karma with that. And like, how do you just uproot a whole system? Like, I don't know. I mean, we fought a whole war over it in the United States. So, but we'll talk about that next week, because that's a big issue it's going to take like a big to talk about the revolutions and the revolts that were happening with the serfs, because there were some revolts that were going on, stuff she implemented, which I find very interesting, which I have some question marks around. So we'll talk about that next week. And I think we'll be able to reflect more on Catherine, maybe not just Catherine, but also Empress Elizabeth, when we look at her son, Paul. Because talk about a freaking case study. Listen, Paul, I hate to say this, but that dude was batshit crazy. In fact, if you guys watch the show with Helen Mirren as Catherine, they show Paul, because she's grown up, Paul's grown up. The actor who played Paul was phenomenal. And the way he played Paul, I went and watched it after I'd done my research. I just went to watch to see what they had done. I watched the series. It's on Hulu. The actor who played Paul did a phenomenal job, because he played Paul in the way that I see Paul in my head, just batshit crazy. Traumatized, batshit crazy. And we'll talk about that when we get to Paul. But that might be a better reflection on not just Catherine, but on Empress Elizabeth too, as to what happened with bless you, what happened behind closed doors. Well, we know what happened. Shall we end with one more picture of some of her furniture?
Okay, we have the chair. Hang on, we had the chair.
Just a little teaser for next week, for part 2.
Table.
Look at that.
No way! Look at that! Oh my gosh!
Could you imagine if you found that table in your grandma's attic?
This is horrible. I mean, well, look at some of those dicky doos. Some of them are poking up, others are drooping downwards.
And look at the
and a pair of boobs there as well, right?
Those boobs are real perky.
Yeah, my gosh, the boobs with the I won't even say like such pornography. Goodness me.
Even the Nazis were like, if your grandma's scared, even the Nazis.
Can you imagine Himmler and the boys?
Even they were embarrassed. They were like,
was jetzt, sir? Was jetzt?
They're like, maybe we shouldn't fuck with the Russians. Like,
exactly. These Russians don't play around. Oh my gosh, that is so funny.
We'll talk more about that furniture, that collection of furniture. Now, I'm serious. Now, Shanti, if someone in school growing up, if a teacher in school had shown you those pictures in reference to Catherine the Great, would you have remembered her story?
Taught us this history. That's the thing. And then suddenly, I mean, can you imagine if you go home and you find these pictures in your mother's encyclopedia or something? Because in those days, there wasn't Google, so they probably would have banned that forever. In South Africa, anyway, that would have been banned. Seriously.
I hate to say this, but bless the Nazis' heart. I can't imagine they're going to that palace trying to find really, really powerful things to help them, and that's what they find? A blowjob chair? Like.
Oh my gosh, how funny that! Yes, Jessica, she likes that. Jessica likes that shit for the table.
Comparing their schlongs to the schlongs on the table, like
some up, some down,
measuring difference, trying to figure out what Russian women like.
Which way is up and which way is down? Oh my god, hilarious!
I mean, talk about some dildos, like like.
Just break it off. Just break it off.
You don't need to go shopping. You don't need to go shopping. Just raid grandma's attic. Just go look at grandma's attic and just break it off. There you go.
Oh, funny.
That will lead us into part 2 next week, guys.
Well, on that note, y'all, I wish you all a fantastic week. And on the note of the Dicky Doos, we shall bid you farewell on this mythical, marvelous, murderous Monday we have with BRICE. So yeah, have a fantastic week. We will be back, not tomorrow, Wednesday with Jessie and BRICE again on solutions. And yeah, we didn't do the Yacht Girls last week. We're going to be doing the Yacht Girls this week.
Well,
yeah,
super interesting. What an appropriate episode to throw right in the middle of our part 1 and part 2 of Catherine the Great.
Exactly. We're hoping that Caleb is back this week. I know I've had a lot of questions and when he's going to be back and stuff. He's just he's had a loss in the family. So, and he's obviously, as you all know, he gets hit quite badly with these things. So, yeah, if he's up and ready, I've actually insisted he take some downtime. You all know Caleb. He was like, nah. I'm like, Mama has spoken. So you see, I'll let you know. I mean, if you see the stuff up for Thursday, Caleb will be there. Friday, I'm on Catherine's show again. Saturday with Brock from Nasara, 17. And we got Patreon Book Club with Jessie this week as well on Sunday. So yeah, a busy week. Most definitely.
On my channel this week too.
Yes, I am on BRICE's channel this week. We just got to figure out what day, but I'm there. Yeah,
you're going to see me on BRICE's channel. We're going to have about some behavior problems we're seeing in the world today.
Some very bad behavior. Some very bad behavior.
Very bad behavior we're going to talk about. Not of the Catherine the Great variety. Do you know, I will say, Shanti, we should call it Catherine and her Swinging Richards. We have this male strip club here in Atlanta called Swinging Richards. I just love that name. Whoever came up with that name was so clever. Swinging Richards.
So clever, exactly.
So clever. So clever.
Catherine, you're swinging Richard away from me.
Which way is the Richard going to swing this time?
Oh, wow, how funny. Okay, everybody, love you all madly. Have yourselves a beautiful day and a beautiful week. And as per usual, thank you so much to all our incredible Patreons for supporting this channel. You really, and as I always say, you are the nuts and the bolts of the channel. And I really, really, really appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. And yes, looking up to Jesus. Sorry, heaven at Jesus. I just don't have it on there. I will pass your donation on to Caleb as well. Thank you so much, everybody. God bless you all.